Jesus' disciples are arguing about who among them is the greatest. Jesus, ever patient and insightful, uses this opportunity to teach them a personal, profound lesson about true power and greatness. I'm sure you all can imagine when you heard someone or you were that person trying to argue who was better at something than the other person. Imagine that. Imagine Jesus listening to you doing that and then calling you out on it. How would you feel? The disciples' argument about greatness reveals a common misconception about power. They believe that power comes from position, status, and recognition. They want to be the ones in charge, the ones who are admired and respected. However, Jesus challenges this notion by pointing out to a child. As we embark on a new confirmation class for 3 of our young people, it's important to remember Jesus' words. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. A child is a symbol of vulnerability, dependence, and innocence. They have no power or authority, and in the eyes of the world. Yet, Jesus equates welcoming a child to welcoming himself in the divine. Think about that for a minute. How many churches still today do not like to hear a child make noise or cry during worship service? How many people will show with their body language that they don't like that? Or look at the parents? Think about that. See, I remember when I first started, no one knew where I stood on that. And I remember that Jessica had a younger child and stood up and went and stood in the narthex. And I stopped what I was saying. I said, you don't have to do that. She might not remember. I don't know if she does. But I said, you don't have to do that. You can stay inside here. See, because growing up, I didn't like that. Sitting in Mass every Sunday, we had the cry room. Our chapel was here, and it was all a glass window. So on Sundays, it became the cry room. And if you knew your kid was going to make a little sound, they had to sit in there. And if you didn't and they made sound, then you got to look. You knew you had to move. If we do that, how are we including children? How do we expect them to learn how to be part of a church community in good faith? If we're telling them, well, if something bothers you, just shoo it away. Think about that. Now, I know some of you in some of the changes that I made, especially to worship service, were like, and now you're like, oh, well, that's what it is. And we move on. But that's important to think about. Think about it. Why does Jesus tend to use a child as a demonstration? And it's because of those 3 words: vulnerability, dependence, and innocence. Just as the 3 young people will rely on their mentors to guide them through their spiritual journey, they will also need the support and encouragement of our entire church community. Just because you're not an official mentor to one of the confirmants does not mean you can't share your spiritual journey. Does not mean you can share your insights. Now, what I will caution you is how you communicate those things. Again, they're spiritually vulnerable, and that's what we need to remember. That's why this curriculum is confirm, not conform. And that's exactly what it is. It is going to be up to them. Kind of like what it was for the girls. Gave them the information. They choose what they take and what they don't take. Just like when you had a Bible study or book study with me. We talk about stuff. I pick up a few things from you all. And you all say, well, okay. And someone's like, oh, didn't think about it like that. Similar situation. And I will say that also in alliance with our church policy, the 3 mentors have had background checks. I wasn't about to put just any mentor with our kids. Because, again, we need to protect them. Vulnerability. And we've seen the headlines, we've heard the stories on the news way too often where things happen. And I don't foresee that happening in this church, but you know what? That's what a lot of clergy say, and then what happens? And I will say that the 3 mentors are having to set an example too, because they're all members of the Faith Forward Commission. So they have a high responsibility. And graciously, they accepted my invitation. I don't know if they felt they could say no or not. One definitely didn't think so because he was voluntold. And Mandy's already the assistant in there. See, Jesus' message is important for us in a spiritual journey as a church family. We need to embrace them as Jesus embraced children, recognizing their inherent worth and potential. Again, we need to be allowing our young people to have an input. Because I will say that the 3 confirmants from last time, the young ladies, they witnessed a couple of things throughout that school year that they spoke about months later. And as your pastor and teacher, it's a little hard to explain why maybe usual human behavior in the secular world, it still happens in the church community, where we should limit that type of behavior. So I'm hoping that we can set a very good example this time around for the 3 confirmants. Jesus' message is clear. True power is not about domination or control, but service and humility. There's been times where something's going on, we're planning something, and someone will say, well, you're in charge. Yes and no. You got to remember how the UCC is built. The church council is still my supervisor at the end of the day. Granted, the president and vice president to another extent, so that we don't have too many bosses. But what happens at that point? I have also been instructed to do my job in a certain way. Alice says I'm not doing it. When I was hired, I was asked, will you be doing this? Elaine, you remember? Will you be doing that? And I said, yes. So those people, Jan, Bob, they're watching. Is he doing what we asked him to do? Linda can say one of the things is, yes, because I visited her at her house several times. Last night, again, went to see Odell. And wait, but isn't that your day off, Pastor? Officially, yes. Unofficially, a pastor is on call 24/7, unless it's vacation. And I'm out of town specially. But yes, I've done it before. Alice, my first year here, called and said so-and-so is in the hospital. They've been there for a few days. And I know you're technically not back, but a visit would be appreciated. And I broke my vacation the last day. I was already back in town. And I try not to do that because we got to keep our boundaries. But at what point do you say, Is it worth keeping my boundary, or is it more important to provide that spiritual help and support at that moment? Right? That's a cost. That's having power. At that moment, I have the power to say, it can wait till I get around to it. Or I can have the power and say, maybe this person needs this right now, or their loved one needs this right now. And if I can provide it and I have a moment, why not? That's how a lot of you volunteer for stuff, right? Is you have the moment, and some of you say, well, I'll squeeze it in between this and this. But you give because you want to. Unless I'm mistaken, I have blinders on with all of you. I haven't seen you do stuff because you're expecting something in return. What I can see that all of us do expect in return is that God is watching and saying, okay, you're trying. Our society often equates power with wealth, fame, and influence. And we know a lot of people out there who are power hungry. We admire those who are successful and powerful and who have achieved great things. But Jesus reminds us that true greatness lies in serving others and putting their needs before our own. I think by now you might be tired that for the last few months I've been pushing and pushing us more into service to others. And why is that? I know one of the reasons that George, I think he's sitting back there, why he moved and became a member here, is because of that message. He wanted to be in service. Granted, he was already doing that. But he wanted to be in a community where it's pushed even more. And you might get more tired of me saying that because it will continue. The path of justice often involves risk and sacrifice. So if you had to choose between justice and anonymity or injustice and fame, which one would you choose? Think about that. It may mean speaking out against injustice, even when difficult or dangerous. It may mean working for the marginalized and oppressed, even without recognition or reward. You've heard me say it before that if we are to open our doors to help people and they're physically in front of us, it is not a photo op. Because we don't know how much it took them to come and say, I need help. Instead, we can take pictures of the volunteers, or if we're giving food, taking a picture of the volunteers giving food. But we don't take pictures of those on the other end of that. Why? When Laura and I went last year to deliver the Welcome to America pack, I asked, are you comfortable with a picture? And you seen her picture with her son on the office window. And she's like, you can so that your congregation could see who they helped. But don't put it anywhere else. And we honored that. And honestly, that was my main goal, is to show you all what we did. That Laura and I didn't go and, say, let's go return and get the money back. The path of injustice, on the other hand, can lead to fame and fortune. It may be compromising our values for personal gain or disregarding the suffering of others. Which paths would you choose, knowing that justice involves risk and uncertain recompense? Jesus himself is the ultimate example of true power and service. He came to this world not to be served, but to serve. He gave up his life for the sake of others, demonstrating the ultimate act of love and selflessness. Jesus' example challenges us to re-examine our understanding of power and greatness. It calls us to embrace a life of service, put the needs of others before our own, and seek justice even when it is difficult. Today's gospel reading reminds us that true power is not about domination or control, but service and humility. The greatest among us are not those who seek to be served, but those who serve others. So let us be inspired by Jesus' example and strive to live lives of service and justice. Let us choose the path of righteousness, even when it is difficult, knowing that true power and lasting joy come from serving others. As you enter the world today, may you be filled with the power of love and service. May you be inspired by the example of Jesus to put the needs of others before your own. May you be guided by the Holy Spirit to choose the path of justice and righteousness. Amen.